to allow the neighbors to meet very inspirational people and have conversations with them, ask questions, share a lot of the positive energy, or get insight into different things, be inspired by their own journey and their own like stories. The first one we actually had it in a digital, like a metaverse that we created, which was really fun because that was the whole idea. Yeah. But I think people were so distracted by the technology. They were clapping, dancing. So I don't know, maybe we'll visit it later, but it was just a whole lot. People were just like going around. Someone wandered to meet one Russian guy at a point, you know, but maybe the next edition we'll try it again. But that one was really fun because your avatar actually gets to look like you.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool. To get us started, I always like us to do a quick introduction. So we're going to do introductions in the comments. And wait, I want to put this up because I took time to design it. It's our tradition to just do quick intros for everyone that has joined in before. So I want us to do very quick intros in the comments. You just put in your name and then just a nice book or TV show or movie that you're watching, and just put it in the comments so that we get to see what everyone is into for a little bit. As you're putting it in, I'm going to be just highlighting a few. Because of time, we can't let everyone just speak at once, but I just wanted us to do a quick intro so that everyone can say hi. People are typing. Oh, so I could get started since everyone is still typing, and just everyone, you know me, my name is Nkechi. One of the best neighbors that we have, just saying FYI. A book I'm reading a book called The Storyteller's Secret, and it's really, really interesting. I'm trying to perfect my storytelling skills, and hopefully you would see me improve over time, so you know the book is working. But it's a really good book. I recommend it. I can share it with you guys if you want. And Chiwendu says she's currently reading Deep Connections. That's really good. Never heard of it though. Is it a good book, Chiwendu, or is it?
It's about how to sustain relationships in the long run.
Oh, nice. Please, you share with me. I'm always big about books that allows you to connect with people in different ways.
Okay,
that's good. Alex is reading a book on the new Atlantis. That sounds so serious and sounds a bit boring. Is it interesting, Alex? I don't know. It just sounds like not a page turner. Is it interesting? Alex, can't hear you. Said somewhat. Somewhat. See, I'm not too wrong. Tobe is reading The Shoe Dog. Ibuku is reading Alchemy of the Soul. Oh, it's watching Alchemy of the Soul. I want to watch that. That's really, I've been seeing it, been popping up for me, but I haven't seen it yet. Blessing is reading Challenges in the Race for Excellence. See, that sounds like a book I wouldn't read. It just sounds so serious. Ibrahim is rewatching How to Get Away with Murder. So just keep the comments, keep the intros going, so we can see what you're reading, what you're watching. Me, I'm looking for recommendations as well. Yes, Ibuku, I'll try and watch it. If it's worth the time, I'll try and watch it. Awesome. So keep the intros going. Everyone, make sure that you intro. So we'll get started. I don't know. Have I lost Ola? Are you still there? Can't see you.
Yes, yeah. I am.
Okay, cool. So we'll get started. It's very casual, and I intentionally designed it to be casual. For me, that I'm always big on structuring stuff, and sometimes I would overstructure a conversation and then it becomes very robotic, which I didn't want. So I like it to be free flowing. The neighbors, they have questions for you, or they have points they would like to discuss. So it's mainly going to be them asking and just having that chat, and I would facilitate. And you can also ask them questions as well. So just to get us started, I'd like you to introduce yourself. Tell us as much or as little as you want to tell us, and as random as you want to tell us.
Okay, so my name's Ola. I started life actually in the UK, and I think one of the strange things about me is actually I ended up jackpotting to Nigeria. So I was grew up in the UK, and I actually didn't grow up with my Nigerian parents. I grew up with white foster parents in a town called Lowestoft. So I didn't have so much connection with the Nigerian community growing up. So I don't speak any Nigerian languages because obviously, growing up with white people. But what they did try to do was connect me with Nigerian culture. So I can remember them like actually attempting to cook yam and getting us yam. And like trying to get us dressed up like Nigerians sometimes, like taking clothes from my biological parents and taking pictures. I can remember that kind of stuff. But because I didn't really live full time with my biological parents, neither of us speak Yoruba. Then went on to university in the UK, and as soon as I started working in the UK, I really started thinking about plotting sort of how I would get to Nigeria. So about a year after I graduated, moved to Nigeria. And like sometimes when one member of your family jackpot, at least some of your family unit like stay in Nigeria. For me, like my cousins are mainly in the UK. And the sort of ecosystem where I had sort of connections, family connections, was really in the UK. And obviously all my friends from uni were in the UK. So I kind of moved back to Nigeria more or less like by myself. And I really wanted to start an emergency services business, which I did after like realizing that seeing patients in the hospital wasn't really what I wanted to do. So started an emergency services business. I didn't raise any capital for it because nobody would have given me any money anyway. But I got a few contracts with oil and gas companies, which enabled me to pay for the operations of the company. Through that, across West Africa, so started doing work in Central Africa and the rest of West Africa as well. Really exciting to have done that and made that transition from medicine to business. And then around 2014, 15, one of my friends who was in the financial services industry asked me to come and be an LP in his first fund. So I contributed to the raise. I also was an LP in the technology fund that he started. And as irony would have it, a few months after we started that fund, he had a medical emergency and needed to be moved back to the UK. And I was kind of stuck with the fund. So we had kind of two choices, either refund everybody's money or carry on. We chose to sort of carry on. We had a good board of directors, an amazing chairman, who is my chairman, mentor, surrogate father, who encouraged us to sort of keep on investing. So we invested in, most of the major fintechs, as well as even a media tech, Big Cabal Media. And this was all sort of 2016, 2015 time. So first investors in a lot of the biggest sort of fintechs, media tech software companies in Nigeria. I really enjoyed doing that. I actually enjoyed doing it more than running my company. So I decided and really focus on the financial side of things. So after that fund was fully invested, we raised another one, and that was specifically to do health tech and fintech, because we've been very involved in fintech from the early days of like Paystack before they got into Y. We invested before they got into Y Combinator. So we were super early investors. In fact, we invested in Paystack. We invested in Shola's first company, and then invested in him again. So that was where I felt like I had expertise. So did that health tech and fintech as fund 2, and then did fund 3, which was raised, which is raised from local LPs as well, and we're deploying into health tech and fintech companies again. So I'm hopefully coming into a chief executive chairman role at my own company. I haven't been running it because I've been working full time in finance, but hopefully I'll get a chance to sort of play an operational role there. Again, as we scale that, and I'm also investing, raising fund 4. Part of the reason why I'm here, in San Francisco. So we'll be raising $20 million for Fund 4, again with the same thesis, health tech and fintech, early stage, Pan-African. What else about me? I'm married, and my husband is amazing. Most amazing person ever. Got married about 5 years ago. And unlike Twitter, unlike Twitter would have you believe, I think marriage is like the best thing. Best thing that's ever happened to me. Super enjoyable, a super supportive husband, and just has made my life exponentially better. No kids.
The colonizer.
Yes, no kids, and no intention to have kids for the foreseeable future. But we do have a house plant, and I did have a dog, but the dog left me and went to Benin apparently, and we've not been able to locate the dog. So that's a bit about me.
Oh my god. Oh, it's lovely to have you. I'm like there's just so much about you. Like there's so
That's
much.
the Republic of Edo State. It was Edo State. Apparently, I think the dog is in Edo State.
Edo State. Is he alive?
Yeah, very much so.
Oh, that's so amazing. Like it's just so much to like. I follow you online as well, and I think what I admire the most is your ability to tell your own story, which is something not a lot of people do so well. And you learn in public. Like you're not afraid. Like when you were getting your master's, you were doing it in public, sharing what you were learning. I think that's quite impressive to me, because most people would want to perfect and then come and just be like, oh, I've killed everything, here it is. But you're fine with, I'm trying to figure out something. I know there was a time that you were trying to learn, I think something on derivatives, and someone stole your money and ran away. Someone who was supposed to teach you or something, right? So it's quite interesting to see that. And for neighbors, if you have questions, please raise your hands and ask, right? Raise your hands, and then I'll just call you to ask whatever question that you have. I want to ask, how do you manage to, like, your life has different segments and components. How do you manage it without like going crazy? You are an investor. You were doing your course where you were studying. You have all these things, and then a portfolio of companies that you still have to have an idea of what's happening inside of them. Like, how do you manage all these moving parts?
Okay, that's such an interesting question. And since we're in the Hangout Lounge, I can actually give like a super truthful answer. I think, I don't think it's necessarily admirable to be able to do a lot of things. I don't think it's necessarily like something that everybody should want to do, because it's work. And I think that there's more to life than work. And for me, most of the things that I do are work related in some way or the other. So I would probably say 97% of my time over the past sort of 10 years, my professional life has been spent working. And I think I've gotten that ratio wrong. So I think that it seems admirable that people do like all these different things work-wise. So I can sort of run my fund, and I can still keep an eye on my company, and I can study at the same time. But when I look back, actually, I think that like I still can't swim, for instance. I still can't really ride a bike. I've like there's some skills that I wish that perhaps I'd just spent some time on instead of just work. So I would say, how do you manage to do a lot of things? To do a lot of things, you have to spend a lot of your time working, more than the average person. But I don't know if that lifestyle is right for everybody. So I think that, probably in my early 20s, I would have said, yeah, you've got to, wake up at a certain time, do this routine, not watch any TV, not, engage, I hardly really socialized. I hardly did things for myself, and I was, always working. But as I've gotten a bit older, I've realized that, life is so rich. And I think that whilst if you want to achieve a certain degree of financial stability and success, work-life balance may not be something that you can achieve early unless you're very lucky.
Yeah.
If you're not
Or have
looking
an
for that,
inheritance.
sorry?
Or have an inheritance.
Oh, yeah, or have an inheritance. But if you're not looking for that, and not everybody is, and I don't think everybody should, then you can live a much more rich and varied life.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Joshua, your hand is up. You have a question. You're muted. Unmute.
Hi, thanks for joining us, Dr. Ola. I just realized we have a few things in common. I can ride a bike either, and I don't know how to swim, so that's quite interesting. My question is actually with regards to, so I'm just going to paste in the chat. I watched this video coincidentally, and this Dr. Akinlade Kolade in that clip, or in that video, he mentioned something about also founding a Flying Doctors. I mean, he worked in oil and gas in Nigeria at some point. So I don't know, like how many, is this a franchise or is this, did your paths ever cross at some point where you, you know, collaborated or something? But he didn't make that claim in that video that he founded Flying Doctors Nigeria. Thank you.
First time I've ever heard of him, to be honest. I'll check out the video.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. Any other? Okay. So Wendy, have a question for.
Hello, Dr. Ola. Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
Okay. I think my question for you is how do you stay motivated with everything that you have to do? How do you find the strength to keep pushing on even with setbacks and failures?
Really interesting question, and really maybe even quite a bit deeper than maybe even you intended it to be, because I think that, you know, super breakout successes tend, contrary to what people say when you really look into their stories, don't actually work that long or hard. They get a banking license, or somebody becomes president and they get like the license or the monopoly on PMS. So in America, you know, like the story of Microsoft, for instance, he was in his 20s, his mom was on the board, and he bought software from somebody else and they adopted it because his mom was quite influential at the time. So like, it's not as if when you speak to, like, even when you watch interviews of most like super like 3-figure millionaires and billionaires, it's not as if there's some hard story behind it. Usually they just tried something and they blew, and it wasn't really, you know, enduring tons of setbacks and failures. You hear that occasionally, but with the like strikeout successes, you know, Mark Zuckerberg was just in university, he built a website, he moved to
someone's idea.
San Francisco. Things seemed to work. Like, but it wasn't as if there was some struggle behind it. He was already in Harvard. His parents already have money to put him there anyway. He would have been successful anyway. So when you look at like breakout successes, as much as people, motivational speakers tell you that you need to endure setbacks and you need to, you know, work hard, the hustle route is actually a lot, like it's a rarer route to success than I just tried something and it worked. So I think, you know, being able to be resilient in the face of success, knowing that that's not the route that most people take to become successful, is actually really difficult. And it has a higher chance of failure, to be honest. But how do I keep myself motivated? I see the people that did take the hustle route. And I think when they eventually get to their breakout success, they do a lot better. So unfortunately for the guys from Access Bank, they didn't like get a banking license and nothing really happened for them for a long time. And they were kind of like hustling around, but they've become like super successful now, right? And they've managed to improve and innovate at a much higher velocity than, you know, the Dash Me banking license guys. So I think that keeps me motivated. And I really, you know, have a strong idea of what is my North Star, what I want to achieve in life, and the kind of scale that I want to build at. And I'm happy to put work into that, knowing that, not it doesn't happen for everybody. And you can continue to, I mean, in the Nigerian context, Elon Musk isn't the hard, well, like in the international context, Bill Gates probably isn't the most hardworking person in America. He's just the richest. Dangote is definitely not the most hardworking person in Nigeria. He's just the richest. So bearing in mind that there's a lot of people, and there's something that is called the just world fallacy, where a lot of people believe that the world is fair and just, and that if you work hard, you'll get results, and if you don't work hard, you won't get results. But it's a fallacy.
That's
it's not true,
right? It's not
yeah,
true.
people work really hard and they don't get any results. And I think that's the thing with back, right? I think it's easy to hustle like Tony if you've already gotten some money and you've already realized that hard work pays. But if you're not getting the kind of money that Tony is getting and nobody gave you a bank, then it's very difficult to start hustling from that low level where you haven't even seen the success. Like for me, like I said, it's about having that North Star and knowing that working and action is the only way that you can kind of take control of your life. And it's the only way where you can almost increase the surface area for luck. So if you want to experience luck, not the kind of random luck that these guys experience where you're born into a certain family or you were in a certain sort of academic establishment, or the only way that you can create your own luck is through really being strategic and really taking action every single day. And that's what I do. And if I get to 70 and I haven't reached my goals, then I can comfort myself with the fact that I took action every day. These are the things that I would, this is the impact that I was able to make in the world because I took action every day, and that's absolutely fine with me. But like I said in the last question, I really feel like it's about having a North Star. So it's about trying to work out what you want to do with your life and not overdoing things. I think we drastically overestimate how much in terms of financial resources we need to live like our dream lives. And I think that sometimes if your North Star isn't really 100% aligned to sort of career success, then you can end up working for a reality that you don't really want. So I think it's a good idea to try to, first of all, really interrogate what you want out of life, because not everybody was meant to, be a hamster in the capitalist rat race. Some people are supposed to make art, some people are supposed to cook, some people are supposed to travel, some people are supposed to enjoy like a career in the media. And I think that if you align yourself with a single trajectory and you're not quite sure that's what you want, then you might end up spending, decades working to something that's, not really aligned with what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really amazing. It takes a lot of like going inwards to figure that out. Like you said, not everyone is supposed to do certain things. I know when people were pushing for everyone to become entrepreneurs, and I think that's great. But it's such hard work. Like it's not the easy way out. People think, oh, it's the easy way out. You're tired of 9 to 5, go and start a business. It's not for everyone. So really going inwards to figure out what it is that you want and let that be your North Star and let it motivate you to keep pushing. Okay, Tabena, your hand is up.
So I'm actually not a fan of entrepreneurship. That's super competent. Like I started my business when I actually had no competence and no skills except doctoring. But I think, there's a skill luck continuum. And I think that if you're very skilled, you will rise in any company. So I was speaking to some of the guys at a Nigerian bank, And I said, that if you call out a general manager or an ED or an area manager or a regional manager and ask them to tell you how to become a general manager, they will tell you step by step how to become a general manager. And if you follow those steps, then you'll become a general manager. If you call Tony Elumelu or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg to tell you how to become what they have become, they have no idea.
Yeah.
They couldn't even replicate it again. So like it's a lot more difficult, even for the most competent of people, to have a stable trajectory in entrepreneurship. And I always give the example on my Twitter of long-term capital, which was one of the most famous hedge funds in America. And it was started by a Nobel Prize winner in finance. And it did so badly that it was, I think, the first hedge fund that had to be bailed out by the Federal Reserve, which is the CBN of America, because it was so awful. It performed so awfully. And this is like somebody at the top of competence, right? Like, how many Nobel Prize winners in finance have there been ever? But he did really badly in entrepreneurship, just because it's a very unpredictable trajectory and more dependent on luck than skill.
Yes, that's true. Tubena, your hand is up.
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Ola, for sharing. Since I'm actually joining from London, one of the things we're looking at is health tourism in a state in Nigeria, and so I wanted to get your perspective. So the whole strategy for the state is to see how they can generate funds through their health sector. So for them, it was almost like, oh, we had pandemic, people didn't have anywhere to go to, and we thought that even after the pandemic, there'll be hospitals. Now we don't even still have that. So the plan for the state is, oh, let this state be, oh, health sector, you can't fly abroad, but I'm moving to this state, I'm going to this state. So what's your view regarding that? Because they want to inflate. So the way states put in, oh, road, bridge, this state, they want to go into hospitals, and they have like at least 3 top star, 5-star, hospitals and all that. Come up with an insurance plan, NHS and all that. I mean, that's really the plan we're trying to work out. So I wanted to get your view. Do you think they can generate as much wealth through health, in Nigeria, in a state in Nigeria? Thank you.
That's an excellent question. And, it's a really multifaceted answer. So I don't know if you've seen my video. I'm going to post it in the chat on the size of the consumer class in Nigeria. So how much Nigerians actually spend and how much the Africans spend compared to Indians, compared to, people in the UK. But just to give you sort of the rough gist of that video, but I will post the link. When you look at sort of millionaires, so people that have real cash above $1 million or more, then you're really looking at a group of about 20,000 people. Now, for context, in India, there are 1 million millionaires. And in Nigeria, there's about 20,000. In New Delhi, there's about 60,000. That's one city in India. And then when you look at the middle class, the middle class earning is about $9,000 or more, then you're looking at about 2 million people who earn $9,000 or more a year in Nigeria. Whereas in India, there are over 100 million people that earn $9,000 or more. So when you're thinking about ability to spend on healthcare, it's really important to think about how much money people have to spend on healthcare in the first place. So when you're looking at the consumer class, you don't mistake sort of the kind of metrics and the kind of spending power that you see in India to the spending power in Nigeria. So that's sort of the context on spending. And I think, when there's an anthropological study that I have to find, I posted it on my Twitter, but I can't remember the source right now, that talks about Nigerian culture as very flamboyant and very sort of, if we have a marginal propensity to spend on things that you can show people that you have, but less so on necessities. So you'd see people, you know, really kind of
Spend on
waiting
big
for their
weddings.
parents to die. Yeah, really kind of like, you know, kind of not spending so much when they're dying, but like having this like super flamboyant funeral, because it's important for us culturally to be able to show what we have. And if people can't see it, then as a culture, I'm not talking about individuals. Individuals can be very different, but as a culture, there's that about us as well. So in terms of the business model around having a state that thrives on medical tourism, I do think that there could be a potential market there, but I think that it would be a potentially less lucrative market than other sectors. So I always give the example that, you know, Dangote knows quite a lot about healthcare. So he's one of the biggest philanthropic healthcare investors in Nigeria. He's built more primary healthcare centers than anybody else except the federal government. But he raised $25 billion and did not put a penny of it into healthcare. He put it into a refinery. He put it into a business that he knows is going to, you know, make a lot of money, right? He knows all the metrics. He's done so much work in healthcare. He's part of the Bill Gates Coalition on Healthcare. He's passionate about healthcare, but he doesn't see a viable business in healthcare, and I'll explain why. In the UK, the NHS pays at the point of delivery for all of healthcare for any UK citizen. And the budget for public healthcare for 60 million people in the UK is $250 billion. The Nigerian healthcare budget is just 40 billion, like about $30 billion. The Nigerian total budget, sorry, is about $30 billion. Nigeria's total healthcare budget is about $1 billion. And the Ministry of Health is lucky if they get the one. So we spend $1 billion for 200 million people, and they spend $250 billion for 60 million people. So, you know, there's a huge gap in terms of public healthcare spending. And if you notice, there's no real healthcare system that thrives when there's no insurance and there's no public healthcare spending. In fact, I think one of the biggest issues that everybody talks about in America is healthcare. It's one of the top two issues that American voters are most likely to vote on. And what they're complaining the most about is just coverage for the poor. If you charge the actual cost for healthcare, even in America, most people won't be able to pay the cost. When I speak about to people in the UK about affordable healthcare in Nigeria, for example, and they're like, okay, why don't you just make it more affordable? I'm like, you people don't understand that a week in ICU in the UK actually costs over £100,000. That's how much the government is paying on your behalf. And that's the cost. You can't bring a carpenter to come and deliver those services. Neither can you bring a vulcanizer. You have to bring a doctor, and a doctor is a very expensive resource. So that's the cost. Unless you want to bring vulcanizers and carpenters to come and be doing the work, there's a certain cost to an elite professional who has spent 11 to 12 years in training. And it's very difficult to reduce that cost. There's a certain cost to medical equipment, there's a certain cost to drugs. And when you combine those costs together, there's a certain cost to healthcare, which is very, very difficult to push down to a level where even the British or Americans can pay out of pocket. So those are the downsides. That said, this states. So I've told you all the bad news. Oh, and there's one really interesting statistic actually about the NHS. The NHS spends Nigeria's healthcare budget in 3 days. The entire thing disappears in 3 days in the NHS. And you know, it's just the budget. Like in Nigeria, the UK is able to collect 35% of GDP in tax. So they collect a lot of cash to be able to pay for things like the NHS. And that's why when people japan, the first thing they complain about is the bills, right? The taxes, you know, they feel like they're working for the government, essentially. Afghanistan, under the Taliban, fighting probably the greatest military force in the world, was able to collect 9% of GDP in tax. So Afghanistan still, even with all those headwinds, still collected 9%. Nigeria actually only collects 6% of GDP in cash. So when they write down the budget as 1 billion, that doesn't mean the Ministry of Health is going to get 1 billion. It means that we get some cash from taxes, we get some cash from oil and gas, but that's not the money we're going to use to run Nigeria. Maybe that's 5 or 6 billion out of the 30 billion budgeted. The rest we go and borrow. So that's why we're raising like 3 or 4 Eurobonds a year. That's why we're looking to IMF. We're begging for World Bank money because we never have the money complete that we budget. Whereas the UK always has the money complete that they budget. So in Nigeria, you know, I don't know how much of the 1 billion they actually get, but that's the idea. That's the target. But it's never that complete. So I think one of the things that the state has to consider is definitely around pricing. And around pricing for the Nigerian market. Nigerians are very cost sensitive. We have, you know, when you're talking about volumes, there's a very small elite. And there are already so many hospitals catering for those elites. Right now, most hospitals are running at 40, 50% occupancy because those the elite is actually quite small. And every single hospital that is built for, you know, a very small amount of people. So if you're building another hospital targeting those same people, they do have money, but they don't have volume at all. So you have to consider really carefully who you're targeting, whether you're targeting that small elite. I would say between maybe a market size of probably 5 million people with the kind of prices that can afford to pay out of pocket or through insurance, and would travel to a state outside, I'm assuming outside Lagos, for medical care, or you're targeting a more mass market where price will be much more of a consideration and where you'll really, really have to ramp up the volumes. So I do think it's workable. I think there needs to be a lot of financial modeling and thought and targeting as to how the model would work. But I think that Nigeria does need better healthcare. And if you can contribute to that and make impact in that space, then that's super exciting. But I'm also very passionate about health equity. And nothing makes you think about health equity more than being here in California. When I was going for my honeymoon, we're going on a cruise, and at that time I was still calling myself a doctor. I don't call myself a doctor anymore, but that time I was still introducing myself as a doctor. So the Uber driver asked me, you know, what I do, and I said, oh, I'm a doctor. And he said, oh, you know, and the reason why I don't introduce myself as a doctor is people start telling me their medical problems. So yeah, here this guy goes telling me about his knee, showing me the scar, and I was just trying to enjoy my honeymoon. And then his foot was like on the top of the chair. Like I was like, why did I say this doctor thing now? And he was showing me the scar of where he went to Mexico and he almost got shots and all of these things. And the story was actually quite dramatic. Like, why were you in a danger? You live in California. Why were you in a dangerous area of Mexico getting this like dodgy operation that does not look right, and almost getting killed by stray bullets in some gang war that you entered? Like, the story was super dramatic. When Stanford Medical School has just built a fantastic orthopedic center like 5 minutes from you. And he told me it was because he couldn't afford insurance. And I'm like, what do you mean you cannot afford insurance? You people have come again. You start saying that it's slavery now. Like, look, how much do you earn from Uber? And I realized that actually If he was to buy health insurance, it would take 90% of his Uber money. And he was not even joking. He was a hardworking guy. But it was just that the cost of insurance was so high, and he needed this operation urgently. So he had to go to Mexico. So one thing that I would say on the health equity piece is that building good hospitals doesn't mean access. It just means that you have a good hospital for the rich people. And, you know, majority of Americans are still going to Mexico for healthcare. Some are even going to India for healthcare. Because as much as there are fantastic hospitals here, number one, healthcare is tied to employment. So once you lose your job, you not only lose your job, but you lose your healthcare coverage as well. And number two, for self-employed people like Uber drivers, like solo entrepreneurs, for instance, like small to medium-sized business owners, they just can't afford the health insurance cost. And when you look at the health insurance cost, even in Nigeria, I pay about 500K a year for my health insurance. It doesn't cover CTs. It doesn't cover MRIs. It doesn't even take me to Reddington or any of the tier 1 hospitals. 500,000 naira a year is more than 60% of the Nigerian population earn in a year. Total earnings. So payment is a problem, health equity is a problem. And while you're thinking about solving problems for the very rich, most of their problems are already solved. During COVID, the rich people did go to a hospital that had COVID outcomes very similar to the UK, to be honest. Rich people can always solve they can always solve their problems in Nigeria. It's poor people that cannot solve their problems. Like if you go to a tier 1 hospital in Nigeria today, you'll probably be treated by the same kind of doctor that would treat you in the UK. There's certain random procedures that like I would rather have abroad. But in terms of what happened during COVID, the rich people weren't running anywhere. They were going to get care that was equivalent, if not higher, to compared to what, you know, the NHS and the American hospitals were offering during COVID. So the rich people definitely have options. And good options, and more options coming on stream every day. I mean, there's a hospital coming up in Abuja that's in collaboration with King's College, for example, and they're bringing a lot of doctors from King's College London to come and run the hospital there. Rich people seem to be getting more and more options for healthcare, but you know that's for 1% of the population. And you know the rest of the population don't really have anything, and they would never be able to afford it. A night in Reddington in ICU now is over 1 million naira a night. That means that if you don't have insurance and you know you're in ICU for a month, you've got to pay 30 million naira.
Yeah,
Um,
that's quite a bit.
that's deep for most Nigerians. I mean, I can remember when I had COVID and I went to Reddington and they told me the price. I remember that I have oxygen at home. Like, I was not even interested. Like, I was like, I was kind of like even half unconscious. But when I can just remember him telling me that, oh, it's going to be this much. I said, look, that there's oxygen in my office. Let's go. Like, I can find oxygen. Oxygen is not my problem. Is it the same qualifications that I have that these people are going to be using? No, it's a scam.
Yeah, like that's why they say in Nigeria, health insurance is the blood of Jesus. Anything more than that. Well, let's run a fun, quick poll. How many people here have health insurance? Just put like hands up or yes in the comments. Let's even see how many people have health insurance, like any form of health insurance. Hands up, yes. There's already a no already. Like, put it in the comments. Let's see how many people have health insurance. Just one person so far. Just one person has health insurance. Okay, 2 now. You see, there's not a lot. We'll come to that. We'll definitely come to that. I saw Stanley. Your hand is up. You can go ahead with your question.
Okay. All right. Good to meet you, Doctor. I've been following you for a while, and you've been exceptional. Yeah, I'm a I'm a strong follower of, of you on Twitter. Yeah, and I Really appreciate, and I learned a lot of things, a lot of your experiences. I learned from them a whole lot. So I just want to ask, how can a startup in West Africa get funding? Because I know it's not been easy for people to get funding. A lot of people have startups that are promising, and it's just funding, that is the problem, either from LPs or venture capitalists or angel investors. It's not just been easy for a whole lot, and we see in the news people getting investments, and I don't know if you could share, one or two, procedures or experience in getting funding as a startup in West Africa or Nigeria. Thank you.
So I've written a whole thread on this actually, and it's just I actually wrote it yesterday on Twitter about the funding situation now. And I think the funding situation has deteriorated from what it was, 2 years ago, and it's a lot more difficult to raise funding. So in that thread, I spoke about 5 tips for founders to raise funding, and the first is around, building networks. I think that's like super important.
Deteriorated in the last 2 years,
Oh,
in the last few months.
Yeah, it has deteriorated. So we're calling it the big VC freeze of 2022.
Of this year, right? Not in the last 2 years, because you said in the last 2 years.
No, compared to the last 2 years.
Okay.
So there was a VC boom in 2020, and there has been a big VC freeze from 2022. And yeah, it's been pretty scary how the funding situation has deteriorated for a whole number of economic and political reasons, which sort of I highlighted in that thread that I've placed in the comments section. So I realize that founders are finding it increasingly difficult to raise funding. And I put down sort of 5 tips, I guess, for founders raising funding in this really difficult fundraising environment. And the first one is really around access to networks and making sure that probably you set aside. It sounds terrible because you're supposed to be building your company, but I would say at least now 1 day a week to building networks. Because unfortunately, it's not the best products and it's not the best founders that raise capital. It's the people that have the best networks. I'll also say networks can be, directly with angels and VCs, but they can also be through accelerators. Accelerators are now playing, a much bigger role, and incubators are now playing a much bigger role because they can introduce you to their own LPs, and they can also introduce you to investors within their networks. So I think access to network is the number 1 rule of the game. I think 2 is around traction, like the standards for traction in general in the fundraising environment are much higher than they were before. So, people were raising billions of PowerPoints, and people still are raising billions of PowerPoints. But it's increasingly harder to pull that off. And if you're based in Africa, if you didn't go to an Ivy League school, if you're not well networked, then that becomes a lot more difficult to do. So I think access to networks is really important. And I think that trying to bring yourself closer to the providers of capital is really important with the angels, and doing your research, so finding out what firms invest at your stage, in your geography, and in your sector. That's important. I think the next tip was around, after access to networks, was around preparation. And preparation has that research bit that I spoke about, but also preparation is around getting all of the stuff ready for the fundraising process. So making sure you have your deck, making sure you have your story right, making sure you've gotten feedback on that story several times through several iterations, making sure that you've practiced your pitch several times as well, making sure that you have all the information in your data room and you're not like scrambling around for things, making sure that you understand VC psychology and the way VCs think. The more you understand VC, the more you understand who you're pitching to and what their objectives are, And then when you get the chance to pitch to somebody, you tend to have a much better outcome. And make sure you start fundraising before you need it. So it shouldn't be like when you have like 2
1
weeks
week.
left of money that you start to fundraise. I think that you try and fundraise. You should start your fundraising process quite early. And then the third one was, running what I call a tight process. And by the term tight process, I mean, taking the time to socialize and know investors. So when you go into the process, you're running quite a competitive process. You're kind of like seen as a hot startup. You have an idea of who might write you checks informally, at least. So that when you go into the process, you're packing your meetings in, you're having like 5 or 6 meetings a day, you're banging them out. And hopefully that should create some degree, although less so now, but some degree of sort of FOMO, and hopefully get you the terms that you want. And I think, the last one is around valuation. I think valuations have drastically changed. And I think that people still hang on to valuations like it's a reflection of them, it's a reflection of their parents, it's a reflection of their upbringing, it's a reflection of their destiny, it's a reflection of the way they look, it's a reflection of their self-esteem. It's nothing like that. I think it's more a reflection of what Jerome Powell is doing at the CBN of America and what Vladimir Putin is doing in Iraq, right? They have really, really influenced the market cycle by raising interest rates and causing a lot of inflation. So being flexible, don't take nonsense. So I'm not saying that. There's a lot of people that will underprice you and it's rubbish. Don't take nonsense. But being more flexible around valuation as well. I mean, in 2020, there were companies, I gave an example of a pitch deck that I saw that was raising, and they had raised $70 million and they were generating less than $10 million.
Oh,
But they had
okay.
raised 7.
Yeah.
Was it not better to put the body in Eurobonds?
But even Adam
Like,
Newman for Flow, they've generated $0, and they raised
absolutely.
what, 300 million, 350 million.
Absolutely. But like for fundraising purposes, just assume that you're not Adam Newman. Like I said, it's not the best companies that get funding. It's not the best founders that get funding. It's not the best. It's not the companies with the best traction that get funding. It's not the smartest people that get funding. It's the best networked people.
Oh, yeah.
Overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
You can have a really, really rubbish company, and if you have the right networks, and you have a famous co-founder, then you will raise venture capital easier than people that have much better metrics.
Yeah, that's true. That's why funding keeps going to the elite founders again and again. That's the disparity
Because they have the best network.
Yes,
and I think that's really a metaphor for life, because networks, there's very, very few things that you're going to achieve in life that won't be achieved for other people. And that can be in a traditional career, in terms of, like I said, career is more merit driven than entrepreneurship. So if you're a super hard worker in KPMG, you will get promoted and you will become a partner. But that's not the same in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship has less merits. It has less requirements for competence and more requirements for networks. If you think about, the best entrepreneurs in the world, they've really achieved things through other people and through, raising capital at the right time, through having, and it's been, there've been great ideas. But Mark Zuckerberg had the same idea as MySpace, to be honest. And what was that one called? High Five. They were not the first movers. If you think about Google was actually the search engine partner for Yahoo Search. So Yahoo Search was actually the biggest search engine in the world. And Google was just a contractor. So the idea was not unique. It was just, the way that they funded it and what happened afterwards, mistakes that Google made perhaps. But like what I'm saying is that opportunity is everything. Networks are everything. Even if you look at the Nigerian context and you look at like our rich list, they're not necessarily like the most hardworking or smartest people. They're people that had access to networks and had access to opportunities. And, not everybody did. So that's why I started with the just world fallacy, that we want to believe that the world is a just and fair place, but it's not. And whatever you can do to sort of level up that level of advantage that you have in terms of really building strong networks and investing in those networks over time is super important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are almost at the out of time. So thank you so much. But I do have one question and then we'll wrap it up. Since we're talking about networks, what would be your strategy for someone who wants to really build their network in whatever area, whether as an entrepreneur or to expand and grow their career? What is your advice for someone that wants to actually do that successfully?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I would say it depends on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, and how aggressive you feel that you can be with your networking strategy. So I would say if you're quite introverted and if you don't feel like you can wake up every day and follow your networking plan, then I would say the best thing to do is probably, apply to an LBS, for example, Lagos Business School, or apply to an elite school abroad. And that will automatically give you a really, really strong network that is difficult to replicate, right? If you're a Harvard grad, if you look at the graphs on Harvard grads, for instance, they just out-earn any other graduate from any other university in the world. That's not because of what they're teaching them in Harvard.
True.
That's because of, the strength of the Harvard network. If you look at INSEAD, if you look at Princeton, if you look at Stanford, then those people just earn more. And it's not because they're particularly good networkers. It's because of the fact that they went to, a certain university. And I'm always teasing OAU people on Twitter, but actually, like, networks like OAU, networks like UNN, networks like ABU. Like, ABU has practically taken over the government. They're all the ABU students are holding us hostage. Like, they give each other jobs, they do each other favors. If you like, some people have actually gotten jobs by pretending that they went to ABU. So getting into university networks for somebody that believes that they can't really wake up every morning for 4 years and execute on a networking plan might be the right way to go. If you can't afford it, or you feel like you are dedicated enough to execute on a networking plan, I would say, you need a firm networking strategy. And one of my favorite books on putting together a networking strategy is by Keith Ferrazzi. It's called Never Eat Alone. If you don't want to buy the book, there's also a lot of short summaries on YouTube. And he talks about how he put together his networking strategy, even though he started from Harvard, though. So he started from a high network base in the first place.
Already,
but in Nigeria, yeah, but he's sort of like a kind of networking expert in terms of joining communities. So joining communities like this, for example, any opportunity or anything that brings you together with the kind of people that you feel like you need to network with to get to the next stage in life is a good community. So I would say join as many communities as possible. One of my mentors, Richard Ajayi, when he moved to Nigeria, I asked him, how many clubs are you in? And he said everything. Boat club, tennis club, speaking club, even Yoruba tennis club. I remember, like, he came in with a super aggressive networking strategy to, be helpful to as many people as possible. I would say chambers of commerce, for example, are good networks to join and pretty cheap to join as well. And it's not just about joining them either. It's about serving, because I think, unless the reason why MBA students kind of stick together is because they've been in the trenches together. It's not as if they went to a few meetings a year together. So getting on the committees of these organizations and really being part of the ESCOs, being part of the boards of these, volunteering your time for all of these different communities is really important. So, gosh, how many? I've been a TED fellow. I have been a World Economic Forum Fellow. I've been an Aspen Fellow. I'm a member of the Young Presidents Organization, which is a global organization of entrepreneurs. I am on Women in Finance. I'm on the ESCO. I'm on the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the ESCO. I'm on the NASG. I'm chair for healthcare. I'm which other communities? I'm missing one. I'm on the ESCO for the British Business Group. And I'm a member of the
You're on
Capital
the
Club.
founding council of Talent City. Just saying.
Correct. So, like, community is really, really important for networks, and finding communities that you can be a part of, or even building your own communities through a mastermind group or a business group. If you feel like you want to start your own community of people, is super important. But networking strategy. A lot of people don't have a firm networking strategy. They just, you're playing, but you're not really playing to win if you don't have a sort of written down networking strategy that you're executing every day. And if you can't have that, then go to Harvard or try and go somewhere where you're forced to bond with certain people. But like, I believe that relationships are life. Serving is really important. And very, very little of your achievements or your goals can be achieved on their own. You need to be able to build coalitions. You need to be able to build community. And that's really where the magic happens.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. I think that's a great way to just wrap up. Thank you so much for taking out the time. I know it's now like 7 a.m. at your time, waking up early to do this. We truly, truly appreciate it. Neighbors, you can put a thank you in the comments or a clap or something. Just let her know you appreciate her so much. Thank you so much, you guys. And thank you, Dr. Ola. Well, Ola, since you don't want us to call you doctor, but thank you so much for taking out the time, everyone. And that's it. Enjoy the rest. I don't know if you have any question for us, but if you don't, do you? Ola, do you have a question for us?
No, I don't.
Awesome.
No,
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Bye. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.